Sorry, two points. The first one, coming back to this landlord-tenant bit, I believe that the big bit of the bill generally is the supply of central air conditioning rather than anything else, and the question of how you do the thermal metering to do that, how technically difficult is that? The second thing is, one suggestion is, at the moment here in Hong Kong we have property tax, so for commercial buildings you pay rates, but we do not have tax on electricity. What the government could do is to get rid of the property tax and to put the tax on the electricity instead. So the government gets the same amount of money, but it's on the electricity bill, not on the property. It will simplify the tax code. Sorry.
But you might need to explain.
And yes.
That therefore the benefit. Spell
okay.
it all out for us.
Okay. So the benefit of this, simplistically, if the property tax bill at the moment is the same as the electricity bill, if you make this change, you double the electricity cost, you halve the payback period for doing energy efficiency measures. And my question actually is there anywhere in the world where this is happening?
Well, whilst you think about it, let's take the next question. So that, people in the room can think a little bit.
Okay. So you brought up the issue of return period 2 or 3 years. Generally, for a lot of these clean energy efficiency things, what's the typical period of time, and is it improving because it's a green issue, or are most developers still just purely accountancy based rationale on deciding whether you're going to implement green things or not? How much is there value added for being green versus the normal ROI? So what is the typical ROI nowadays in terms of years?
Okay, and then there's a question over here and a question back there. So let's. Okay, anyone would like to take that question?
Yes. Lutz Hagmark, Airconmiser Limited. I have a question for Dr. Lee. You described a project where we had a zero emissions building, actually a new building if I understand correctly. Do you know if the government has any plans to show the new construction technologies on existing buildings? I mean, I understand the government in Hong Kong is one of the biggest owners of properties here, like what we saw from Germany, where they had one of these so-called high-rise 16-story buildings totally refurbished. Is there any plan to show the construction industry what can be done on existing buildings in Hong Kong?
Okay, so we have two questions, one about the public sector, one on the private sector. Where are developers in Hong Kong today? So who would like to, and I give you a chance to also experts up there, because I know some of you, I know some of you know a lot about these issues as well. Who would like to take up which question? Wei Yi.
I can answer that question straight away. CIC actually is not part of the government, so I couldn't speak on behalf of government. Actually, I couldn't speak on behalf of CIC, I couldn't speak on behalf of myself. But however, I do know there's government officials around here. It's Jimmy Chen from the Development Bureau. I saw him earlier. I think probably he will be the best person to answer this any government initiative on this one. But before I hand it over to him, my understanding is yes, I think the government is there's like an energy bill and the retrofitting regulations, and also I know there's building energy, so the Business Environmental Council. They're also doing a demonstration retrofitting project for their office. That's for the existing buildings. So that's all. That's all on that. So, it's Jimmy Chen.
Jimmy, are you still here? Maybe not. Kira.
Hi. I thought all of the presentations were brilliant, but Raymond, I just wanted to congratulate your style, which I found very, very organised, and I really like the way that you sort of split things up into years, and fantastic. So, you know, let's think about these 40,000 existing builds. I mean, how much do we know about them? How old are they? Where are they? What is the breakdown? Commercial, residential, etc., etc. So, any chance Arup could hook up with the rating and valuation department, because I know that they've got all the information about these existing builds, and let's find out more about them, and then we can start implementing all of your suggestions. But at the moment, all we ever hear is 40,000, and I think 4,000 have been retrofitted. But it's so vague, and there's not enough information.
I guess the question is, what does it take for us to have some kind of data set for all the buildings in Hong Kong? What does it take? Does it take, is there a privacy issue? You know, does this require legislation? What does it take?
What we did was just plowing through the document from the Rating Census Statistics Department to get the details, but I don't think they would got individual buildings characteristics and so on, but generally you got the existing building stock and also the buildings that will be refurbished soon if it turned out to be their record. 45,000, and in the next decades or so there will be another 5,000 and so on. Hong Kong GBC is looking into this area, particular in view of the government trying to revitalizing the industrial buildings. So some measures or some effort have been put together in giving advice through the Hong Kong GBC how to revitalize those existing, particularly industrial buildings, which tend to host much wider potential for retrofitting in a much simpler way, rather than those individual multi-tenant residential buildings, which you can hardly do a lot on that. But no doubt that it is a very important area that the community will need to focus on in order to help us to bring down the energy consumption as well as the carbon emission. This is no doubt something.
What I find very interesting is probably in the last 2 years, I've personally noticed that the effort made by the Development Bureau to link to energy efficiency and greener buildings, it seems to have happened in the last couple of years. Would you agree with that? If we look back at the last, I think, was it the 2009 policy address, where the government allowed the change of use for industrial buildings. And at that time, I think the policy address, there weren't really any details about using that at the same time to push through some green measures. But I'm hearing from you and others more recently that the Development Bureau is now trying to maximize or optimize the green output. Am I right on that?
Yes.
Coming.
I think your observation is correct that I think in 2008, the Professional Equipment Council went to actually Australia with Carrie Lam to see what Australia was doing. We were pretty impressed by the Australian at that time. I think on one hand, because of the impact of climate change that was so evident in Australia, so at all levels, from the public to the politicians, are all aware of the green building challenge. So they do react to that. I'm certainly aware that the other countries are also following such a progressive approach. But after that, we all returned to Hong Kong and talk about how to accelerate our change in Hong Kong. So we set up the Hong Kong Green Building Council with support of Carrie Lam. And I think the CIC Silkam project is also supported by Carrie. And this year, Carrie also went to the World Conference held in Helsinki again to learn and talk about the state-of-the-art green building movement. So I think in the last 2 or 3 years, we do see a lot of changes in Hong Kong. So those are really progressive and positive. But I always have a feeling that while actually reacting to your earlier question, what we would foresee in the forthcoming 5 years, I think on one hand, we will see more green buildings in Hong Kong. Say for BIMPLUS, in the first year, we got more than 100 project applications. So if 100 buildings per year, so in 5 years' time, we would have at least 500. Not too bad. But I always feel that the Hong Kong people's culture is still not catching up in many cases. Because as mentioned by many people, that even we can have hardwares, good green buildings, but if the people, in the software side, the people inside are not really reacting or changing or catching up, then the actual consumption could be as high as before. So I do look forward to seeing Dr. Lee's zero carbon building to be completed, it's not only to showcase a kind of carbon neutral construction in Hong Kong, but it's actually a kind of education center. It's to educate and transform the people, hoping that people can be aware of the issue and change accordingly. So I think the challenge facing us is not only about a carbon neutral new building or retrofit, as mentioned by Dr. Lee, that tomorrow morning, actually the Business Environment Council would have the workshop on talking about transforming their own building in Kowloon Tong, how to make it to say reduce carbon emissions by 40%. Okay, so they are targeting to have that retrofit project to be completed in a year and demonstrate the possibility to do a kind of economic way to retrofit the project and save 40% energy cost. So if you have time, go to BEC tomorrow 9 a.m. To join the workshop about retrofit. But most importantly is how to transform Hong Kong's people's culture. Given our territorial character, Hong Kong people are not really feeling the threat of the climate change and other energy and resources scarcity problem. So I think that's something that maybe Civic Exchange can do more. Thank you.
I also want to ask one question, which is this one about data. Because Rudita, you've reminded us, and I think everybody, we've said it. You know, Hong Kong people, I get the sense that we can now go into the internet and we look for all sorts of things. And if we had a kind of continuous data set about our building, you know, our flat, or even our community, right? We talked about how about what option, right? You know, our building estate, you know, what's happening. I think we'll start looking at it perhaps like the weather. So what is it that Hong Kong can do to start getting some interesting data that the people would be interested in? I mean, I say this because Civic Exchange has worked a lot in the air pollution and public health area. And together with the experts, health experts at the Public Health School at Hong Kong University, we've developed something called the Headley Environmental Index. So what we've used in this index is we've taken government's air pollution data that is released moment by moment, and then from that you are able to do calculation on health costs, days lost from work, and so on. So I'm just wondering, the internet platform that is now available, what are some of the things, I mean, if anybody has any ideas, what are some of the things that we can do to start uploading what kind of information that will start to alert us to Hong Kong's energy use, and then maybe gradually, you know, you get it down to the community level, to the flat level, to the building level. I think it's a good way of energizing people. I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but is there a way that we can start this process? Does anybody have any idea? Yes. Yeah, I hope.
Actually, KSF probably from this week's little theme upgrade thing on passive design. Actually, I advocate sort of like a building energy labeling thing. I said it should be sort of linked to a carbon footprint. So it's sort of like carbon footprint building energy labeling scheme. So you can, that's very easy. You can start it straight away. So any building you walk into has a plaque, a design plaque, i.e. the target plaque, and then the actual plaque, right? So and if let's say Jones Lang or Central Line, they adopt this system in every flat that they rent out, in every commercial building they rent out, and if the government have the political willpower, then they would adopt it as sort of like a legislation, and it's a sort of like something you have to do. So when you sell a flat, it comes on your lease saying, or whatever the sales brochure, an energy target, and what the tenant has been using, or using the energy for the last year. So you know the actual performance, let's say, is very low, and the guy is wasting it, that's all, because they haven't done it properly. So I myself is a very big advocate of building energy labeling anyway, and I think KS know about that. So I think this is the right way forward, if that's a suggestion. Thank you.
Yes.
And I know if there's a 40% reduction, how many years do they willing to accept what they cover their costs to do that?
Okay. We just started the study, but based on the overseas experience in general, actually a few years would be returned. So it's really a kind of very good cases. You mentioned the Empire State project. I think the data is also that the payback will be within a few years, right? So in general, it should be okay. But I think for the BEC project, it's really to demonstrate that it's doable, and we will have more accurate data to show that what would be the achievable target in Hong Kong.
Okay, we're reaching the magic hour of close to 5 o'clock, and I know people want to rush off home. May I ask each of our panelists just to round up by giving us your final thoughts? So if I can start with you, Raymond.
The CRC zero carbon building or demonstration building actually highlight one very important process in terms of identifying the energy hierarchy, which is trying to do the most simple approach to begin with. Reviewing energy use of the building, not oversizing the building, and then undertaking passive design, meaning not using up electricity to run the system. So measures such as considering the thermal properties of the buildings, shading coefficients, considering the window to wall ratio, thermal mass of the building, and so on, have all put into as the first approach. That will ends up reducing the energy demand to begin with of the building. That actually surpassed the requirement of the OTTB and achieving a very good insulation of the building itself. So that would cost the least. From payback perspective, that's the least, because you can, by designing a better building. A similar approach could apply to commercial or other buildings by having an integrated design team to begin with, considering all this passive and low-cost issue. And then looking at making your system more energy efficient by considering seriously about outperforming, for example, the building energy code, which will be enforced next year. Industry are already starting talking about whether we can specify, for example, less lighting power density as stipulated in the code by considering options like background lighting and cast lighting, which is highly implementable and used in a lot of advanced economies. But we are not doing it as frequent, as often as we do in Hong Kong. So these doesn't cost a lot, but it certainly have a different behavior perception to these, so that need education. And the last to close it is to really look at how we can address the carbon issue. How much energy supplied to your building are going to come from non-fossil fuel base? Whether we can buy green power, whether we can generate some power by renewable means, no doubt, I think the payback would be extremely long. But it is a kind of commitment your corporate and company will consider seriously how much you want to do in that respect. Because by considering the still quite expensive renewable technology. But certainly, if you try to equate this development bureau's attention with the environmental bureau's attention, carbon, then you can get a story behind. That's why I'm very adamant that for climate issue, it's got to be at the secretarial, ministerial level to coordinate the real effort, which are working independently or interdisciplinary, but we can see it will be much more effective with, in the upcoming, we got a new administration that they put a lot of attention into this particular area, coordinated all the good efforts by the bureaus, but in a more effective way. So that will be my conclusion. Thank you.
I would like to pick on the 2 points. Number one is at the very beginning of the zero carbon building project inception stage, we were thinking about how we can achieve the zero carbon emission. And there was one joking about it is you build it and then don't use it, then that's zero carbon emission. Now, if you also look at the extreme condition, You can design a building very well, very energy efficient, but if you don't use it properly, you still don't achieve your objectives. Okay. So that leads to the people's behavior change. If I saw a data somewhere that says about the contribution to the energy saving, about 70% actually coming from human behavioral change, and 30% coming from the others. So I just want to emphasize the human behavioral changes, and to do that actually it's a long process. During lunchtime we were talking about like even back in 10 years ago, not many people heard of the green building. So now everyone knows what's green building about. And also, we were talking about this shark fin soup. Even when 10 years ago, not to drink shark fin soup, that was unimaginable. It's energy generated from a renewable source, and then that goes back to the electricity grid. So at the moment, it's free of charge. That's not a very good story to tell. But obviously, I understand there's an issue why we export it for free, because the electricity utility companies, they actually have to invest in the infrastructure to take in this non-stable and fluctuating electricity from this building. To them, actually, it's not a profitable business. So somehow I think the government needs to have certain policy to go with this sort of measures, so that the people feel that by saving energy, or by exporting the renewable energy to the electricity, they actually benefit themselves as well as benefit to the community.
I just wanted to say something about the ROI quickly. For a specific measure, like let's say a solar thermal panel, the ones that generate hot water, 6 or 7 years is a typical figure for payback. But for a large speculative office building, say, there's quite a lot of data around which talks about increased rents, increased percentage of lettable area. If a large international tenant is looking for a green building which has a label of a gold or a platinum, and I think those kinds of incremental improvements far outweigh often the cost of the bits of technology. So for me, it's about finding more data about adding value to the building. So that was the ROI thing. Final thoughts, for me it's about regulations. It's also about transparency, and I'm completely with the guy about the energy labelling, saying I think that is quite important. But finally, it's about reputation. And if you use the words Germany and energy in the same sentence, I think a lot of people immediately think they're really good at that. You know, low energy buildings, Germany are good at that. And at the moment, Hong Kong, when I first moved here, and I told a colleague I was moving to Hong Kong, and he said, "Isn't the air quality really bad in Hong Kong?" And it was quite sad, and of course it is an issue here. But wouldn't it be nice if in 5 or 10 years' time, people associated Hong Kong with something more positive and more green and more to do with low energy? And I think that would be really quite an achievement.
Dr. Buttigieg, your last comment from you.
First of all, let me again thank you for being your guest here and hearing so much information for me also. And well, coming back to our topics, I would say if I could take a picture from the sports, the aim to have a gold status building, sustainable and with zero energy demand is not a 100-meter sprint. It's more 10,000 meters or even more. So when we started with our legislation, so we also had to find out that our data, which was available, was very, very poor. So it's of course more reasonable to start with new construction houses. Then you have a chance to bring together from the very beginning the planner, the architects, also the technical engineering. That's very, very important. And then you can, with relatively small costs, you can bring in systems like DGNB or other things. So we say it's about, well, let's say, for a really high riser, 10,000, 20,000 euros at least, not more, just for the system. So much more complicated is the question how to deal with the stock of existing houses. So that's really a problem. And there you can start, as we did, bring in more transparency for the real energy costs, which means, for example, just concrete, whenever a tenant is going to rent a new apartment or so, then it must be mandatory that he is told how much is the real energy cost per say per square meter from his apartment or whatever. So this is more or less European legislation, and at least in 2018, 2020, every single new rent treaty must be accompanied by the certificates for energy performance. So that's what I could recommend, but thank you again very much.
Well, that's a very appropriate example to give. You've reminded us that actually arriving at green buildings and energy efficiency, that it's a marathon. Germany started 30 years ago. We're now kind of getting into the act. And as we all know, if you're going to run any distance, then we got to get fit. And we know in Hong Kong we're not very fit in this area yet, but we have some early champions. We have some people who are ready to get into training. And we have some ambition from the government that maybe we can be fitter and faster. So I'd like to think that in 5 years' time, when we invite Rudiger back to Hong Kong, maybe even earlier, that you would be able to be a good check on us to see if we are fitter and faster. So thank you very much for spending the afternoon with us. Let me hand it back to Andrew just to say goodbye.
Thanks very much, Christine. Just a few thank yous. Thank you very much to the German Consulate for sponsoring today's event. A very big thank you to our panellists and our guest speaker and our moderator. Thank you to you as well for spending your afternoon with us. Perhaps we could give our panel show some appreciation in the usual way. We've had a feast of insights and a feast of different angles from geographically across the world and across a lot of disciplines as well. There's nothing more to say except, again, just to remind you, all of the presentations will be put up on our website over the next few days, and there will be a summary report over the next couple of weeks. And other than that, thanks for coming, and happy travels home. Thanks.